Good afternoon. Welcome to PMO Learning's latest webinar. We're going to be talking to you today about the role of the PMO Administrator. And before we get going, we'll just let people come in, settle in, take a seat. It's nice to see you. Well, we'll not see you, but you know, nice to welcome you.
Be in your presence.
Yeah, indeed. So for many of you might already know, Eileen and I, we normally do more interactive things, but because this is a webinar, you've still got the ability to chat. You should be able to see the chat button on your screen. Eileen, do you want to kick us off or tell people who we are?
Okay, so we'll may as well kind of go on to the slide in terms of kind of who's talking. So I'm Eileen Roden. Lindsay introduced herself. We have been in and around PMOs for all of our working life. So even though we weren't necessarily kind of started in there, we've always been around project and program management, specifically within the PMO. And a number of years ago now, Lindsay and I set up the PMO Learning organisation because we felt it was important that people who worked in and around PMOs actually had some specific training. So rather than just kind of go on to the back of project management training like a lot gets offered, we wanted to set up something specifically for people who work in and around PMOs. So we've been working for the last 3 years building up the organisation, as well as doing a range of other interesting things to support people who work in PMOs.
I'm Lindsay, and obviously working with Eileen in PMO Learning, and I've been in and around PMOs for far too long. I did start working within PMOs, and then I started a business around recruitment around PMOs, and now we're here training around PMOs, but also doing work with the PMO community. And so today, this is one of my favorite elements of PMO is the people that are perhaps coming into PMO for the first time, or have changed their career and wanting to get into project management. It's those roles that I think provide a really vital role for organisations that are delivering projects and programmes today, and that's of a PMO administrator. So without further ado, then let's take a look at the agenda and what we're going to be looking at today. So we've got, obviously we're going to talk about the day-to-day role of a PMO administrator to give you insights into what it is that this role does. We'll be talking about the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are needed to perform well in this role. We'll also talk about how PMO administrators can develop themselves, the career path of a PMO administrator, and then the next steps about how you can become a PMO administrator. So I'm probably quite aware that there's different types of people on this session. If you'd like to just pop it into chat, just let us know. Are you a PMO administrator already? Are you looking to get into the field? Are you completely new to project management, or are you a manager that's taking on PMO administrators or looking to develop them? Let us know in the chat. So it'd be nice to try and understand where people are coming from. So on to the next slide, and let's have a look at the day-to-day role of a, who are PMO administrators and why do we need them and what do we do? So as you can see there, there's a book called the PMO Competency Framework, which has come from the House of PMO, which is a professional body for PMO people. And within that competency framework is 4 different types of roles, which the project PMO administrator is the first one, is the first level of those roles. And within that competency framework, there's a role profile that tells you about what PMO administrator role is and what it does. And we're just going to show you some of the insights from that. But ultimately, PMO administrator is there to support a project, program or portfolio manager and their team in the administrative and secretarial aspects of the role. So that's its headline title. That's what it does. And, ultimately, you're there to help projects and projects team do the work that they need to do by supporting them in whatever aspects you can. And we'll look at some of those aspects. So, but from a day-to-day point of view, it's quite an interesting role because in lots of ways, I think when I first started in this role, I remember somebody saying to me that you have to be highly organized. And I think this day-to-day role and this kind of, looking at somebody's the notepad of things that they've got to be doing in that week. If you look at this day, there's a lot of things that are going on, that are switching and changing, doing things for different people, picking up certain documents, doing tasks and activities, using different tools and techniques, and you're often doing that on and changing it on an hourly basis, a half-hour basis. Sometimes you're getting interrupted by a project team because there's the members of a team, there's something that they need urgently, so you're dropping that. So you've got things that are going on the set times of days and what's happening with the project. So you've got things that are coming in on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and then we've always got those kind of things that just need doing, but where am I going to fit them into the day? So about the things at the bottom there, you've got like, these are the stuff that I absolutely need to get on with doing, but also I've got things that need to be happening at certain times in a day. And it's a varied job. It's a lot of things that keep people on their toes. When I think about and talk to people that are wanting to come into project management, just trying to understand, what is it about project management that that you're really wanting to work in that space? And I think for a lot of people, it's the variety, it's the challenge. It's the deadline-driven type work that you have to do. It's the different multitudes of people that you're working with. It's not projects can be busy places. They can be stressful places sometimes, but they can also be places where celebrations are going on because we're actually hitting the milestones. And so it's a nice role where you can feel that you are in control of the tasks and activities you have to do, but you're not waiting for somebody to give you the next thing to do. It feels like a role that you can really take control of and take charge of. And I think that's why people like the idea of working in projects. And I think this day-to-day diary gives you some ideas of what this role might entail.
I think it's also quite interesting, Lindsay, as well, is that, that this diary, although it's not kind of explicit in the kind of what we see here, just as because you're working as a project administrator, you may be working on one particular project, but actually you may be the administrator for a number of projects. So it actually even gets more exciting because you've not just got these activities and things to schedule for one project manager, you're actually doing it for a number of project managers or a number of program managers. And so because all of those projects are at different stages, you're getting to see lots of different things. So you're seeing some projects start up, you're seeing some projects potentially kind of struggling a little bit in the middle because they've got some kind of really aggressive timelines. And as Lindsay said, you've got this kind of celebration because some projects are kind of coming to kind of fruition and kind of closing. So you've got a great kind of span of things that you could be getting evidence of and have an experience of as you in a project environment.
Yeah, totally. So if you move on to the next slide then, Eileen. So for PMO Administrator, there's essentially for the entry-level requirements, there are two aspects. It's about having that basic understanding of project management. You need to understand what's happening on these projects. You need to be aware of, well, what kind of things is that project manager doing in order to be able to support that, and understanding what your project teams are doing, not necessarily what they're doing in the detail, the technical aspects of their job, but understanding how that team's working together to perform a particular activity or to produce something for a customer or whatever it might be. So you have to have that basic understanding of project management and what those elements are of things like, what does it mean when they're talking about requirements gathering? What does it mean when they have to do a risk management workshop? How are they planning? How do we make sure that they, that the right people are doing the right pieces of work at the right time? It's all those kind of things. And that's that basic understanding of project management. And then from that is that expectation of, well, what do I need to understand about this stuff? So when they're talking about a risk management workshop, what's expected of me as a project administrator or project support officer in that type of activity? How do I support that project manager? What am I expected to do? Same when it comes to thinking about requirements and planning and scheduling. What is that role of the PMO administrator and which is the role of the project manager? It's trying to understand exactly what's going to be expected of you. So if you have a look at in a bit more detail about what the key responsibilities are, and this has come from the PMO Competency Framework, as we said, it lays out exactly what the role profile is for this particular role. But it also, and we'll show you, and Eileen will take you into more detail, some of the core competencies that are required in order to perform well in this role. But from a key responsibilities point of view, this is ultimately what your job title and your job profile would look like. There's a few other things added in there because each organisation has certain, things that a project administrator would do within their organisation. But by and large, these are the basics of what a PMO administrator does. So when we talk about the administrative and secretarial aspects of a PMO administrator's work, you can see that that's all those things like workshops and meetings and taking meeting minutes and chasing down actions and booking travel and sorting out meeting rooms and can you just purchase this and can you just do this for me, all of those kind of things that you'll get. And those ad hoc queries, that those two words as ad hoc queries, just so many different things that you could possibly ask to get involved in, and again, wide ranging depending on the projects that you're managing, the people that you're supporting. And then we've got all that kind of information and documentation that you find in projects. It all needs to be managed in some way, it needs to be maintained and put in the right places, and it needs to be filed so people know which version's the right version to be working on, all of that kind of good stuff. There's all those different systems where when we talk about, you'll hear monitoring and control being quite a big aspect around project support. To monitor, we need to be able to maintain systems, like to record the costs of things and the timesheet and the hours that people work on projects, how much are we spending, all of those kind of things. There's systems that need inputs and need managing. And again, it calls the PMO administrators to do a lot of that in their work. A PMO administrator role, and going all the way through PMO roles, you will always see reporting. And there are so many different types of reports that get produced and lots of different people being involved in those from different stakeholders, different types of reporting in terms of the types of numbers. Does there a visualization? Is there some analysis that goes into that? Who needs to know about it? Who needs to make sure that the actions have been chased down? All of those kind of things need producing, and again, it falls to the PMO administrator. And then we have those areas like risk management, so the risks and the actions and the issues and the changes that go on. All of these things need to be written down, noted, filed, checked, updated, maintained. Again, it falls to the PMO administrators to do that work. And this is what a project manager comes to rely heavily on, is having a great PMO administrator next to them that is able to pick up all of these things and starts to do it without the project manager having to explicitly say, you need to be doing this, you need to fill out that register. It's something that becomes very natural. So the relationship between a PMO and a PMO administrator and a project manager becomes a really one based on trust and respect, because you need that in order to be able to work well together, and to also, and sometimes, to anticipate what will be needed next by that project manager and that team. So if you could go on to the next slide, Eileen's going to take us through what we mean by the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are required for a PMO administrator.
Okay, so this is typical of any competence framework. We look at these kind of different elements, these different kind of characteristics that we need to kind of have and develop to be successful in our roles. And the House of PMO, in terms of the writing of the competency framework, have kind of pulled together a selection of knowledge, skills and behaviours in totality. And what we're going to do is pick out some of those ones that have been identified specifically for this particular role. So again, once you kind of build up these kind of skills, the knowledge, skills and behaviours, they will set you instead for your future career within the PMO. I think the other thing to kind of recognise before we go into these in any great detail, as often the PMO administrator role is somebody's first step into the world of project management, and very often people come in from other administration roles. So certainly my sister-in-law has been working as an executive assistant. They've all been renamed and they're now all project officers, so they're kind of coming in essentially kind of the project administrator role. People have come in from other organizations that I've worked with. It's seen to be a kind of a career progression from being a kind of a junior administrator to moving into a project administrator role. So there's a lot of things that you already know, skills that you already have, and behaviors perhaps that you've already been encouraged to demonstrate that actually will help you establish yourself as a really good and effective PMO administrator. So let's just have a look at some of the 6 areas of knowledge that have been identified to help you be successful. So the first thing is just the applications and tools that you use in your organization. So undoubtedly we'll have some desktop applications, you know, and the Word and even the email system. All of those things are relevant to project and program management. But as Lindsay mentioned, if you're using a procurement system, it may well be exactly the same procurement system that you've used to do your business as usual job. So again, bringing that kind of knowledge and experience of the procurement system. It may be that you've got some specific recruitment systems that you've used, or an organization intranet. And again, all of those things are really useful for you to kind of bring onto the project team, because you know how to kind of access certain bits of information, certain processes that you are undertaking. And to be fair, going on any project management training course isn't going to give you that knowledge. That's information that you know you're going to have to pick up from your organization. Second area there is about understanding your role and how that fits in with the other roles in and around the individual projects and other administrators, to make sure that we don't kind of overstep the boundaries, but recognizing where things need to be escalated and escalated to. So the third one along here in terms of change and delivery methods, this is really probably going to be new to you in terms of doing your role. And this is where, as Lindsay mentioned on the previous couple of slides, having an understanding of not just about projects and programs, but how projects are delivered in your organization. So again, there are lots of project management training courses that will say how projects per se could be developed. But in your organization, how do you do it? How does your organization do that? What templates do you use? Where are those templates stored? How do you break down project? What are the chunks your projects are being delivered into? Again, the next one along there in terms of corporate language and communication, and the kind of the internal politics. Now, you know, regardless of whether we like them or dislike them, they always exist in certain organizations, and having an understanding of where those relationships are will help you as you transition over into kind of working in and around projects. It's not that you completely lose touch with the people who you're working with kind of previously necessarily, but there are some different relationships that you need to kind of grow and understand. We've talked about applications and tools, and here we've got corporate processes and procedures. So again, from an administrator role, typically what we're thinking about there is kind of booking travel, looking after the stationery, being able to secure, particularly if you're paying for an offsite venue, what's the kind of the whole kind of the approval processes that need to be followed. And I think to me that works very closely with the next one, which is about the organization's governance structure. Now, in an organization, there's typically some there is a structure, an organization structure, so you can kind of see who reports to who and what roles people undertake. When we move over into projects, every time a new project set up, there's a new little organization structure set up for each individual project. And that is continuously kind of changing. As I say, new projects are set up and other projects close down. And the organization structures for projects are sometimes quite different to what our kind of permanent organization structure is. So that's an important thing. And again, one of the things that we may be asked to keep up to date as a project administrator is all of these kind of the project organization structures and how they fit together. which gives us our kind of final kind of real area of knowledge is about understanding who to contact for whom. So, you know, where should you be going for an escalation if you've got a problem? Where should you reporting things to? And where you will potentially bring up a great wealth of knowledge for the projects is all of the network that you've had in your previous role before you kind of came into project. So again, you may know everybody in the kind of who's looking after the kind of the room booking and the facilities department. That would be really useful for projects who are looking to kind of develop a number of workshops over the next few weeks. So again, don't lose your network just because you've moved into projects. Kind of bring it and add to it as you kind of go through that role. So if we just want to take one of those roles, one of those kind of areas of knowledge, and go back to our kind of our day-to-day, the types of things we might be doing, and just kind of showing some of the things that we will be using that knowledge for. So I'm going to take the bottom one first, funnily enough, which is kind of check those purchase orders. So again, we may have done kind of procurement activities in our day-to-day role, and we will be doing exactly the same types of activities to check that those purchase orders have been approved in the procurement system. However, what we will also find is that we will be using potentially some new systems that are specific to project and program management. So again, we may not in the when we have worked in our previous roles, we may not have updated timesheets. We may not have had to record how many hours people have worked on various tasks and activities. Whereas in a project world, that is much more typical. So again, there may be new systems, there may be planning systems that you need to get to know and understand. So again, I just want to kind of go back to the kind of the competency framework and this kind of role profile. It's a really useful tool to help you understand how you can get ready to do that administrator role. But if you've been given that administrator role, it gives you some really good pointers in terms of the types of things that you can drive and learn and kind of work to improve to be even better in your administrator role. Second just area of knowledge is this kind of this organization's governance structure. And I just want to kind of say again around this whole kind of concept of the organization structures in and around project and programs. And it becomes really quite important that we pass the right information to the right individuals. So even things like sorting out the steering committee, there's no kind of, it's not a static organization structure. So there will be new steering committees set up for every project. And interestingly, about kind of being able to keep them up to date and making sure that we're having the right people invited to the right meeting, particularly that becomes more important where you're managing one or more projects. Where we need to send things for review, we have something, and I know you've been chatting about other things in the chat. I'm just going to put I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of project language while we speak. Okay, so there's this is some kind of typical project management language where we talk about RACI. So who's responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. Now for every project, there'll be an understanding and hopefully documented who is responsible, accountable, consulted and informed about all of the different aspects, all of the different artifacts that are produced during the project. And again, you will need to understand where people sit in the project organization structure. So as you're producing project deliverables, you get them sent off to the right place. And again, it's not a kind of a standard role where, you know, kind of Lindsay's busy doing, you know, she's one of the directors of PMO Learning, so I know it's always going up to the director of PMO Learning, because on a project, Lindsay might be the project manager, but she might also in another project, she might be working on the project team. So you need to understand how these roles fit into the overall project. And again, from the status update meeting, yes, remembering who needs to be there, who needs to have what information, and we'll kind of come on to kind of recognizing that there are certain things that only need to be known by the project management team as opposed to the project delivery team. So that's just understanding this kind of organization's governance structure, particularly how it fits within the project land. Now, when it comes to skills, there's a whole raft of skills, and those highlighted in red are those that we've kind of picked out that are particularly pertinent to the PMO administrator role. Now, when I look at those, I would suggest that none of those are going to be new to you if you've done any kind of administration role before. Yes, so from a project management administration, you will be building on your skills and further developing your skills in order to do that role. So let's just kind of have a quick look in terms of what that might look like in our day-to-day diary. And I think the ones that kind of definitely come out, as Lindsay said, and this is, I think, a real challenge from a project administrator role, is balancing competing needs and overall time management. If you've done an executive assistant or a peer or a secretarial role working for a single individual, it becomes quite easy to kind of, well, not quite easy, but you can have a conversation with your line manager to say, well, I've got, you've given me these 3 other things to do, and I'm kind of got that fills me up for today and tomorrow, so I can't do what you want till Thursday. When you're working on multiple projects, being able to have those kind of conversations with 3 or 4 different project managers who ideally would all have you full-time if they had their wish, and being able to manage that effectively without you overloading yourself, but still being able to maintain good relationships with each of those project managers is definitely where you kind of have to hone some of those additional skills. And I do want to spend a little bit of time on behaviours. Certainly when the competence framework was being developed, we've said there are several times we've met project administrators who have absolutely, they know everything they need to do the role. They absolutely have all of the skills. However, how they choose to behave means that we would rather not have them working on our project team. Yes, so this kind of whole kind of capability issue is no problems whatsoever, but it's the behaviours that will really make the difference in how effective you are and how successful you will be with the project teams that you are working along. And there's 6 that we've picked out that are key to the administrator role, about paying attention to detail, level of pragmatism, and I've always said pragmatism is the kind of a key skill of anybody who's working in a PMO, making sure we understand the bigger picture. So, you know, not looking at each individual task, making sure we're a team player, and that we actually demonstrate the behaviours that we're expecting the rest of the organisation to deliver. Taking ownership of tasks, understanding exactly, you know, kind of what's required, and make sure if we were given something to do to carry that out. Now, again, a lot of these behaviours are absolutely applicable, and you will have delivered those and demonstrated those in your previous roles. Where it becomes important is because most project work is milestone driven to kind of specific dates and times. So it's really important that we kind of take accountability of that. So we've got open and honest and taking time to build relationships, building up your credibility, and knowing that people can kind of trust you. Recognizing this kind of act with discretion and integrity. So again, this may be something you've done in a previous role where you've had access to confidential information. Again, that will happen on projects. There will be things that are happening outside the project which may have an impact on the project that you may know about, but actually the project manager, the project sponsor, has deliberately chosen not to share at this minute because it's not definite, and recognizing kind of where you can share information. And sometimes sharing information across projects can also kind of cause some difficulties as well. So this kind of clear about maintaining our level of confidentiality. And then this final one, which I think is, again, really important, but important in any role, is about recognizing the limits of your expertise, and recognizing that as you kind of step into the role of project administrator, much as you would love to be the next kind of super project manager, that actually there's some kind of stepping stones between where you are now and where that needs to be, and making sure that you agree to do those activities that you're capable of doing, and making sure that we're kind of asking for help in the right way. And you know, kind of there will be opportunities as we go through the as you go through your day-to-day role. So the interesting one I've picked up here is need to be at the lunch and learn session. Now, interestingly, we may have, as the administrator, organised that session. Yes, but actually we can still take the opportunity to attend and listen and learn from that. So, there's two very different types of behaviour. I've organised it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of sit in the corner and be there in case anybody needs a hand, or I can actively participate and generally kind of take an interest in the kind of the lunch and learn session. So again, we're going to be developing our behaviours as we go through and undertake this role. So I've just picked on a couple of the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Interestingly, if we had a bit more time, we can map all of these onto all of those different activities. And certainly if you're looking at developing your skills, again, the competency framework is really useful to say, well, actually, have I got some examples of where I've demonstrated this skill, or where I can get this knowledge from in our organisation, and kind of have I got examples, and would people support me when I say I demonstrated these behaviours in carrying out my current role. So in terms of kind of getting to the kind of the first post of being a good PMO administrator, it really is about kind of taking all of your administrative skills but understanding how they play in a context environment. And once we're kind of sitting there in that kind of administrator role, then we're just going to look at kind of some of the additional competencies that you may want to develop, which are much more kind of project specific, that you may or may not have kind of come across in other administrative roles. So first one, well, we're going to look at 6 in particular, and we've picked these 6 because typically these are the 6 that PMO administrators start on as they start thinking about kind of progressing in their PMO or project management career. So the first one that we're going to look at is change control. Now, the key thing around change control is about recognizing when we start off on a project that there are things that have been agreed that we're kind of delivering, and everything links back to what has formally been agreed. So we will have this concept of a baseline cost, a baseline scope, a baseline budget, baseline resources, and we need to make sure that anybody or any changes that are requested go through an appropriate process, so they're assessed and looked at by the right people. We do some impact analysis, and we make sure that any of those changes, that all of the relevant documentation is absolutely kept up to date. So at any time somebody says, have we got a current list of all of the changes that have been agreed, all of the ones that have been rejected, or all the ones that are waiting to be looked at, we're the individual who typically will have all of those kind of documents, understand where they are in that process. And although we're not accountable, we're not there to kind of manage the change control process, it will be a process we need to understand so we can be doing the right things at the right time with the various kind of bits of information that are around there. And I think this is where kind of it links very closely to information management. Now, information management is where do we store, where do we keep all of the data that is available on this particular project or program. Now, in our organizations, we'll undoubtedly have some data storage facilities. So whether that be file serve, whether that just be a shared directory, or whether we load stuff onto a works intranet, whatever that is, it's very important that in a project everybody has the right version of the material. So again, if I want to know the budget, there's no point somebody kind of giving me the budget that was agreed 3 weeks ago if we've had 2 or 3 changes applied. So very much in terms of understanding where that information is, where it's held, what version is the correct version, when does that information need to be taken down, who has access to that information. Now, if you're working in an organization that has got ISO 9000 and you've gone through all of that process, they will all be applied to the project documentation. But again, in terms of the types of document we have around the project, may be new for you to kind of get to grips with. So again, information management. And I have to say, information management may be one of the kind of the key things that you start with in terms of kind of working out where things are, because people will be saying all the time, so Eileen, where's this? And you go, well, actually that's been updated and the latest version is stored in this file. And in some organizations, however much it kind of seems quite archaic, in a lot of organizations there may still be lots of paper, physical paper, that we need to kind of be aware of where it's at and where that's stored. The other another area that we get involved with is issue management. So issues are basically things that are causing us problems at the moment. And typically they will be documented. So there'll be an issue register, which is likely is going to be one of our responsibilities to kind of keep up to date. We may be chasing the actions from the people who own those, and again making sure that the right people are being kept up to date with anything that's happened on those issues. So whether the situation's been resolved, or whether the situation is continuing, or actually whether that's kind of worsened. So again, it's not necessarily our role to make a judgment call as to whether it's got better or worse, but it's passing and collecting all of the information to provide that to the right people who need to know. And we talked, didn't we, before we were talking about a day in the life of a PMO administrator, of kind of the steering committee. So if a particular type of issue occurs, so for example, if we've got a major resourcing issues, who is the right person? Who do we need to flag that with? Is it just the project manager? Does that need to go to the steering committee? If it's particularly an IT resource, do we get in touch with the IT manager? So all of those things in terms of the escalation routes are the things that we will need to start to understand around issue management. And remember, that's going to be different from one project to another project. So that, again, kind of just trying to keep all of those networks and structures of people becomes a key part of our role. Now, as Lindsay mentioned, reporting is a key aspect of any PMO role, not just a PMO administrators. Typically at a reporting level from a PMO administrator is about collecting and collating information on behalf of the project manager. Now, if you speak to any PMO administrator, one of the fantastic challenges you will have on typically on a weekly basis will be getting the information from the people who hold it, so you can actually kind of collate it and report that upwards. So again, building up those networks, building up those relationships with people on the team become absolutely key to being able to kind of do that role. Risk management will be something else you learn about and start to support the project manager specifically. So we talked about issue management of things that were definitely kind of causing problems on the project. Risk management is very similar, but these are things that might cause problems. So these are things that are not an issue yet, but they might be an issue further on down the line. So it's a much more kind of proactive role. And again, similar to kind of issue management and changes, you'll be the person who looks after the register, understands how many risks we're currently trying to manage, who's got all of those actions, chasing up those actions and keeping that register up to date. And the final area, and it's certainly we work one of our clients, their project administrator and actually even their project analyst spend a significant amount of time doing the supporting through financial management. And again, this is where you can use some of your previous skills. So if you've used your a finance system before, so not just the procurement, but pulled off in terms of kind of department budgets and where spend is against those budgets. Similar kind of skills will be used, but this time we're talking about project budgets and project spend. So again, you may be kind of pulling off those reports for discussion with the project manager. You may be collecting information to input forecasts in terms of kind of, well, what do we think is going to happen on the remainder of that budget. So there are some standard we would say those 6 are the key areas where, as you kind of progress through your role of project administrator, you go from kind of being a learning about how these various aspects run to actually being the right hand man or woman of the project manager, because they actually depend on you to actually kind of support these processes and keep them up to date with the information without being prompted or being managed by the project manager themselves.
Okay, before we go on to the next section, Eileen, we've had a question. Are there standard reporting and information management tools recommended for particular projects? Are there standards?
No, I think if you take the word out standard, so the question, I don't think everybody can see it says, oh, there's standard reporting and information management tool. There are hundreds and thousands of tools out there that you can use. You know, people still use Excel. You know, if I was going to pick up a couple of tools and kind of learn them to help the organization, I would say brush up on your Excel skills. I don't know a PMO who doesn't use Excel to a greater or lesser extent. You know, a lot of the registers, a lot of the finances, a lot of the planning still uses Excel. From a reporting perspective, though, you will have to delve into what your organization uses.
Absolutely, and that's when you come across all sorts of weird and wonderful things that people have got.
And also that we do, I think it's also worth saying as well, is even though you can kind of buy lots of tools, lots of organizations actually start developing tools of their own. You know, and you know, I mentioned Excel. It's something that we kind of cover off on the analyst course. Is that actually an analyst may well start pulling together some trackers that they've created in Excel that they use across their organization. So even if you work in a very small project office, you work in a very small kind of organization who doesn't do a huge number of projects, the chances are you might develop a number of tools in Excel.
Okay, oh, we're getting into some specifics here. We'll let one more come in. So how best to manage a PMO while the organization is transitioning into an agile project delivery methodology?
Do you know, I find this really interesting, and this is it's almost no different to how you would run a normal organization, in that you just need to be very clear about what's transitioning. So where you're still delivering projects in a waterfall methodology, and that's your standard, you need to be able to continue to support them in the way that you've always supported them, and you will then have another set of activities around those people who are transitioning to the new way of working. And as a manager, you need to see those almost as kind of two separate activities, and gradually, if it's going totally agile, then everything will move from one bucket into the next, but you're essentially running, I would suggest, kind of a combined set of activities until you transition over. But it's no different from saying, you know, when we're introducing a new finance system into the organization and we're moving from Oracle to SAP, do we move everybody over a weekend, or do we transition a department at a time? So we have the same issue in the PMO.
And that's a great thing about when coming on a PMO learning training course, by the way, because even though you're being taught about particular subjects, we've got a trainer that absolutely knows the ins and outs of PMO and can really easily answer any of your specific questions in terms of your scenarios and stuff. But if you haven't got any more,
I also do want to say, Lindsay, much as we don't employ trainers who haven't either currently work in a PMO or who have worked and managed a PMO, but one of the things that I always find great on a training courses is actually the answers don't always come from the trainers, because you're mixing with other people who are in the same position as you. Actually, the delegates learn a lot from each other and start building up their external network from people who they've met on courses.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the PMO Administrator, and it's like anything within a project environment. There is a career path, and it's often one of those areas that before the competency framework came along and started to put into place a standard, so we can see what kind of roles follow on from a particular role. There was just really done organisation to organisation before, but so let's have a look at the PMO Administrator career path. And just before we do that, it's also totally valid that you don't move on in any other way, because actually being a PMO administrator is a great job in itself, and you become better and better and better at doing that particular role. And there's lots of people out there that do that and enjoy it immensely, but there are other places to go if you want to do more within the project space. So let's have a look at the first one. So the PMO Coordinator is again, you might different terms, but essentially this is about you starting to work on more complex or more complicated or bigger projects and bigger programs, because obviously the nature of that means that they need somebody that's more experienced in providing support, because some of the competencies that Eileen's covered, it means that you're going to have to step up and do more of perhaps a little bit more of what the project manager might have been doing as when you were an administrator. Actually now you're more experienced, the project manager can hand off a little bit more to you, and that tends to come when you're working on bigger projects and programs where we do really need that extra pair of hands, and the PMO coordinator can certainly do that. The other thing you can also do is become more specialised or advanced in certain areas. As Eileen said, some organisations, their PMO people are doing a lot around finance, so it could be an area that you get more specialised in. In others, it's because it's a large, complex project or programme. No doubt you've heard of that people do the planning role. And the planning aspects of these projects and programs that are huge can sometimes take years, and it's a specialized role in itself. So when you're finding your feet within a PMO administration role and getting used to being in and around projects, that's when you can really start to see, actually, I really enjoyed that part of it, or I'm really interested in how they're doing this bit, and I'd like to learn more about it.
I don't ever want to see finance ever again.
Yeah, well, yes. that too.
It's the converse.
Indeed. But and of course, the other thing about working in projects is that we're not working in isolation within organisations. There are still still parts of the business that are still doing the business as usual stuff. The marketing, the finance, the HR, all of those things still exist, and they still all have links in with projects. Projects are only about how that business is managing to change, and they need more linkages between what's happening in the project space with those other departments to make it successful. So the project PMO coordinator role can certainly get more involved in that kind of stuff, especially if you've come from one of those department areas before you started working in project land. Let's have a look at the next one. This is the one that a title that we have within the competency framework, which is the PMO Analyst. And this again, also found on bigger, better, more complicated, more risky projects and programs. You'll certainly find them there, but you'll also find them working within a PMO role, within a PMO team. And the PMO team is not necessarily just supporting projects and programs. They're also looking at how our organisation can get better at delivering projects and programs. So they're doing a lot more work around things like delivery framework, so looking at different standards. So we just had a question there about Agile. Were we using Waterfall, Agile, a combination of two? It's up to the PMO team and the people working within that team to put in place a kind of delivery framework that everyone will be using within that delivery organisation. So as a PMO analyst, you're getting involved in some of those pieces where it's not necessarily related to the ins and outs and the day-to-day of a project and program, but more about providing the environment, or what we call the ecosystem, for projects and programs to be more successful. So for example, how do we do resource management as a company when we've got all these projects going on and we've got all these people that could work on these projects? How do we organize all that kind of stuff? So it's those kind of things. It's what we call a center of excellence work. So that's the third point there. It's about how do we put in place standards and processes and procedures and techniques and the tools in place. Who does all that? And it tends to fall to a PMO team. And within that team, you have the analysts. So you can see from an administrator point of view, you're starting to build up not just project management skills anymore and project management understanding. It's understanding program management. It's understanding portfolio management. It's understanding lots of other types of business related areas. And that's how, you know, you've got that scope to develop and spread out and find things that really interest you. And then there's also this thing where you can start to take on some of the sole responsibilities of some of the project management tasks. So if you are working on a project or program, often what we'll find is that a good PMO analyst will start to take on and be truly delegated to from the project manager. And that might be in aspects such as planning or the monthly finances or, you know, whatever area.
Or reporting. Reporting is a key one where actually the PMO analyst is trusted to bring all of the reports together.
Yeah. And then finally, from this level, from a PMO administrator, often people don't want to stay within PMO. Goodness knows why. You're just completely mad if you want to do that. But assistant project manager is where you would go next if you're wanting to go down the route of being that project manager. And you tend to find that the next step on from a PMO administrator is to work on very small, not very risky projects, or what we might call work packages. So these are smaller, discrete pieces of work where when we say less risky, we're probably talking that not that much money, probably less people involved in that in terms of project team. But that's generally the kind of work that you would best cut your teeth and start to get that experience of understanding, you know, what responsibilities do I take as a project manager? Now I'm moving away from being a person that supports. So in this aspect, you're starting to get down the route of managing a team. So not only are you understanding how to deliver projects, that you're now having to think about management and leadership type qualities as well. So, you know, really interesting stuff. And then you can also be working on a large program where you could be working alongside a project manager. So again, not as a support person, but you're an assistant to that project manager, a very different kettle of fish where you'll be delegated to across all aspects of project management. And then, of course, there's, you know, taking ultimately responsibility for a planning or a delivery of a work package in a larger program without a project manager. This is for you to do on your own. So lots of scope, lots of different challenges you could take from being a PMO administrator, or like we said, you know, being perfectly happy working in a great role supporting a great project managers and project teams. So on to the final couple of things, really. So it's about becoming a PMO administrator.
So hopefully, as we've gone through the session, you've got a better idea of what's involved in the role of being a PMO administrator. And going back to kind of where we kind of started off at, is a lot of the knowledge, skills and behaviour you can kind of bring to the role. Understanding the kind of fundamentals of project management and learning some of the project management language is really critical for you to kind of hit the ground running, we believe, in being a project administrator and understanding what your role is. And what the House of PMO have done is they've created some certification which looks specifically at preparing people for going into that administrator role. So funnily enough, it's called Essentials for PMO Administrators. So it's for those people who've been recently appointed or are looking to move into the administrator role. So what that will do is that will kind of talk you through the kind of the role profile that we've talked about, but for each of those kind of areas that we touched upon, they will get the course provides you with the level of project management knowledge you need that is appropriate to the project administrator role. So it will talk in a little bit more detail around just projects per se, project organization structure. It will talk through kind of change control, risk management, so you understand those processes. So it really gives you a chance to kind of explore the role in a little bit more detail, and importantly, to give you that kind of project and program management knowledge that you need in order to be successful. Again, it will touch on the knowledge, skills and behaviours, but we're hoping that's kind of a build on what you're the kind of the right kind of person who wants to kind of move forward. And certainly from a PMO Learning perspective, our next course is the 7th to the 9th of September. We've already got a number of bookings on that course, so we know it's definitely going to be running, and it will be delivered virtually. So we'll be joining via Zoom for the 3 days. She says, desperately trying to remember how many days the course was. The 3 days I'm on that course. So if you've got any kind of questions at all in terms of the role, do let us know. I believe Charles, our sales manager, has been in touch, sales lead has been in touch. So if you want to book on the course, if you've got any kind of questions about that, do get in touch. But if you've got any questions, feel free. We've got a few minutes left. We've got 5 minutes left. So you want to put them into chat or questions and answers. Lindsay, I think we've got time for a couple.
Yeah, well, we've got no more, but it's lots of thanks about the insightful sessions. Well, hopefully it does give you a more of a feel for it, because I think one of the things that Eileen and I, we've been around this space for a long time now, and the PMO Administrator role has often been overlooked, I think, and so it's great that House of PMO have put this focus on it, and certainly have a qualification to help people on the way. I mean, I personally, when I first started back in 1990 something, I would have been this would have been perfect for me, because I think at the time, I think all I had available was Prince 2 in the late 90s, so it was a different type of Prince 2. But of course, I'm not a project manager. I wasn't a project manager, and you can tell me the basics of project management perhaps through Prince 2, but it really doesn't, and you really struggle to understand that. Certainly when you're in the environment and working on a project with people, you're not going to get out a Prince 2 manual and wonder which bit that they're at now, and then wherefore what am I supposed to be doing. It's the practical side of it, which hopefully, from what we've given you today, it is about the practicalities of, okay, so if we're doing this on the project right now, what does that mean in terms of what I should be doing, and what should I be preempting is going to happen next, and wouldn't it be great if I understood that once they've done this meeting, and it means that there's going to be these actions that come out of it, I want to make sure that I'm on the ball and making sure that I'm chasing those down, and
I've got time booked in the diary later on in the week to write up the minutes and follow those up.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and it is as somebody has said, course said, vital role to enable projects and program managers. Absolutely, the best projects and program managers that are out there have got great support, and that's what this is all about, just making sure people are equipped and also confident. I think that's the other thing about something like this course, is that half the time when we go into a project environment, perhaps for the first time, or if you've only been doing it for a short while, it can feel intimidating just because of the types of work they're doing, the kind of language that they're talking, the expectations on you, sometimes it feels like there's quite a lot of senior execs involved, and you're not used to talking to people like that. All of that kind of stuff as well is part and parcel of this kind of role, and I think I think the course is certainly going to do that. So I don't think we've got any further questions, but I'd like to thank everybody else for your time, for being with us today, and if you've got any questions, you know where we are, but Charles will drop you a line anyway, just to see if you've got everything that you need from this session. So if you'd like the session and you want somebody else to listen to it, we're running it again 2nd of September. Make sure you're signed up on PMO Learning's website too. We've got a newsletter that goes out each week telling you all about stuff that's going on, just to keep you up to date with things you can learn about in your PMO role. Okay, Eileen?
Sorry, I'm just answering here kind of the final question in terms of the various language. They are at the minute only available in English, but are available globally. If there's enough interest in the certifications and the competency framework, then there's no reason why that won't be translated into other languages.
Yeah. got to sort out these PMO administrators globally. That's what needs to happen.
Indeed.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day, and yeah, we'll hope to see you soon. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.